Okay. Okay, as I was saying, I'm glad everybody came out on a rainy day, and I'm hoping that the rain up there doesn't get through that roof. They claim it's solid. I don't quite believe that. Uh, Today, I've entitled my presentation, A Day at the Races, and it's not the Marx Brothers either. So I want to thank all of you for coming out. But as we go along, I'll be explaining some things because a lot of you may not be familiar with what I'll be talking about. With that, with that in mind, has anyone here ever heard that old expression, what are the last words of a redneck? Does anybody know what that is? It's very simple. What are the last words of a redneck? Why, it's hold my beer and watch this. It will play into this tale. With that in mind, see, this tale opens on a hot, sultry afternoon over in Gaston County, North Carolina, in the year of our Lord, as the Baptist would say, 1960. Our hero and his high school buddies were out one fine Saturday afternoon, and they were at Robinwood Speedway along Catawba Creek, a little southeast of Gastonia, North Carolina. Ronald, nicknamed Boozer, Long had his crew of good old boys packed into his dad's 1958 Chevy Impala, and it was a green and tan beauty. All the women loved it. Arnold Robinson was in there, Keith Carpenter, and our hero, and just let's call him Red for right now, though some people argued he was strawberry blonde. Time was about 1:30 as they rolled into the pit crew parking area of the Robinwood Speedway, operated by the legendary Howard Augustine Wheeler Jr., better known to everybody around the Gaston County as Humpy. They'd had lunch down at Charlie's Burgers and Beverages. That was located down on the Buster Boyd Bridge, down on the Lake Wiley part of the Catawba River. Now, that was in South Carolina, down in Union County on the county line, and Union County was wet, if you know what I mean. If not, I'll explain it to you later. What were they doing there, you ask? Well, they were there to help out Booz Long's big brother, Barry Long. You see, Barry was running a race car that night in the main event on the card at Robinwood Speedway. Barry had some last-minute defections from his crew, like all of them, and had asked us to volunteer, fill in, each ignorant for the most part as to their duties as a pit crew. Booz was going to be working that night with Bird Curie on the refueling part of the job. Keith Carpenter and Arnold Robinson was going to be changing tires, and Red's job was to be the supplier of water, food, Coke, and window cleaner for the driver. Red was also the general gopher before the race, as the others had to practice their jobs. Barry had a 1957 jet black Ford Fairlane 500, number 54, that was running that night. He called it the Stallion. It had a big North Carolina State Wolfpack decal on the hood. Advertisers, sponsors were written all over it. RO's Barbecue, Gastonia Sheet Metal and Roofing, which was Barry's company, Hamp's Freezer Locker, and Double Cola Bottling Company were the ones I remember. Frank Coons, and that's his real name, the chief mechanic, had to be the floater and person who would try to fix any issues on the fly. He and Barry instructed the guys refueling and charging tires as we waited around. Red was over there practicing washing windows and getting to do it quickly, too. Some of the tire changing and gas stuff he tackled, too. He also practiced carburetor filter changes, water heating, etc. And all the guys thought, man, are we going to have some great tales to tell when we go back to school this fall? Well, everything was going fine until they sat down to eat their supper. They had cheeseburgers and fries and sundrops from the Beacon Drive-In over in Gastonia. Barry's girlfriend, Susan, had brought up those along. We sure appreciate it. She would also be the team's lap man that night. That was the person who kept track of the number of times the driver had been once around the track and sent him signals with big posters from the pit. She also sent signals like, come in, slow down, or a number telling them what place they were standing in the race itself. Then Barry comes running up, looking like the devil was on his tail. Everyone tensed up. A little hollow formed in the pits of their stomachs. What the hell was going on? They were thinking. What is this? Listen, Barry yelled. I need a new driver. Everyone just started yelling what they thought. He said, hey, Barry, would it be, hey, man, we need a new driver. What the hell for? You're the driver tonight. Barry yelled back, shut up and listen. Yes, I am, in car number 54. Everyone hadn't quieted down. Barry paused, then dropped his bomb. He said, what I need is someone in car 63. Dead silence. My planned driver is out on a drunk, or that's what his old lady told me when I called to see why he wasn't here at Robinwood, lamented Barry. Keith blurted out, wait a minute. We're expected to work on one car here only tonight, isn't that right? And now you're telling us we got a second car we have to cover? You see, today in NASCAR, you got to have a pit crew for every car on the track. Back then, things were kind of loosey-goosey, and you could get away with stuff like that. More babbling broke out, and finally Barry yelled, I'll give anyone $25 to drive 63 tonight. More muttering. Look, you clowns, all you got to do is get up on top of the track by the rail and just cruise until you get the checkered flag. There will be some number of cars that are going to drop out tonight, and if you finished in the top 4, we get money. If you hit the lap count, we get free entrance into the next 2 weeks' races. If 63 don't run tonight, guys, I'm going to lose sure starts in the next 3 races. So Barry leveled a stare over at one of the boys, Arnold Robinson. A couple of guys said something like, yeah, Arnie, you're the best driver here tonight. You're the best one. Go for it. Arnold piped up, hell no, Barry. Says, I wouldn't do it for 100, not even $1,000. I'm good, I know, but I'm not putting my butt on the line for no money. You know, my girlfriend, Ida Mae Hall, would kill me for trying, even if I survived. I'll just stick to the changing of tires, thank you. He then looked over at Bird, and Bird's replied, and he says, I'll take you offer up. I'll do it for 50, though. But you see, I ain't got nothing but a learner's permit. Oh, me. No, replied Barry. You got to show them a real driver's license, not a permit. You're wondering how this swindle could go off. But you got to remember, back in the 50s and mid-60s, there was no pictures on the driver's license, so you could pull that one off. Barry then looked over at Keith, who was generally thought of as the wild hair in this group of guys. He was one of the good old boys. He would snow a girl, get into a fight, or put a church key to a beer at the drop of a hat. He'd do most anything and was always asking us to hold his beer and watch this. Okay. Keith put his hands up, though, and said, backing away from him, says, ain't going to do it, Barry. Ain't going to do it. You can forget it. All our jaws dropped. I mean, here was him saying he wasn't going to do this. We figured he'd be right there on top of it. If I lose my job, said Keith, over at Far Yarns, says, because I get hurt and can't box up the spooled yarn, how can I get me a jalopy for going to school next year? You see, Keith's dad and mom had split up, and it had fallen on him to get his brothers and sisters to school every day and take them to the various things that they did. Living just inside the city limits, the county bus system was out for them. They couldn't use it. His mom was a secretary up at the Rayless department store, and she needed that car too. Barry sighed and said, that's okay, Keith. I really need you on the wheels anyway to handle those tire changes if we need them. And as for you, brother, looking over at Boozer, he said, you've done some pit work before, so I need you as a general fill guy and gasser. That leaves you, Red. And as for you, brother, and everybody jumped over and looked at him and said, yeah, Red, go for it, go for it. They started questioning his courage, questioning his manhood. You know the drill, how things like that go. So everybody's yelling, and what about it, Red? You going to drive tonight? All the other guys just ragging and ragging on him. They was wanting to for him to hold up the honor of this group of rednecks because they call themselves the Union Road Boys. Okay, Red thought it over. I can have date money and gas money for a month. I won't even have to siphon any gas to keep going. He had learned how to drive on the dirt out on Sandy Plains Road. His dad taught him some tricks with the family's old 49 Chevy two-door. You know, tricks on how to get in and out of skids, bootlegger slides, bootlegger turns, as well as spinning out of control and drafting. He even snuck onto Robinwood Speedway one evening and took a couple of laps several months back. He thought, hell, this will be a piece of cake, thought Red. Little did Red know that tonight's dessert was going to be humble pie. So, puffing out his chest, he yelled, hell yeah, I'll do it for $50, cash up front. Sorry, said Barry. All I got is my checkbook. Is that okay? Fine to me, said Red. And with a whoop and a handshake, the deal was struck and the check written. And as I said, Red still had a little of that Dutch courage on board he had picked up in South Carolina. So he didn't need anyone to hold his beer. Okay, let's get you set up, big guy yelled. Barry and the whole damn crew trooped over to Frank Coon's panel van truck. Frank dug out a set of goggles, a set of coveralls, and a helmet. He also dug out a pair of driving gloves, all stiff with sweat, dirt, and who knew what else. Laughing, Barry handed them to Red, saying, no sweat, man, they'll fit you okay. They'll probably let you wear those penny loafers you got on tonight, but if they say something, you just tell them your steel toes are back at the car. So Red stripped to his jockey shorts, socks, and then put on the stinking coveralls and promptly started to sweat. It was hot and humid that afternoon, like most summer afternoons out in the Catawba River Valley of North Carolina. But it didn't bother him because being a guard on the Ashley High football team, he was used to being in a soaking wet uniform 3 or 4 hours at a time. Then the goggles and helmets were added and just to fit. Lastly, the gloves were tried and then removed until the race. Let's go look at your chariot, Red. Check in and I'll explain all you need to know. Red was going to drive number 63. That was Red's high school football game jersey number. A good omen, he thought. His adrenaline was a-pumping. So Barry instructed him to 1, keep the car up on the top of the track. 2, as much as he could to stay away from other cars out there. And 3, don't let anyone draft you unless I tell you. And 4, try to keep your speed between 50 and 55 miles per hour at all times. Long showed him the driver's hand signals that they would use to communicate out on the course. And next came the signs for what those placards held up in the pit meant. Red asked Barry, when do I come into the pit? Barry said, if the gas drops below the quarter tank mark or she's sluggish or something you don't understand happens, come on into the pit quick like. The car's carburation and spark advance have already been set up. Anything else? Just try as best you can to get back to the pit. So Red crawled through the windows, got himself settled, and started to set up the 4-point safety harness in there. Most of these other cars had only a seat belt or a 2-point harness, and this will come into play later. Let me tell you a little about what a stock car was or wasn't in those days. The class of the race that evening was to be late model stock. If you raced a stock car, it could have nothing on it that couldn't be bought through a dealer. A simple example would be like this. If the car was sold by the company only with a 2-barrel carburetor, and you had a 4-barrel carburetor on it that a regular customer couldn't purchase at the dealership, then that would disqualify the car. You could not use a part that had been supplied, say, through Western Auto, Pep Boys, or the J.C. Whitney catalog, or some other thing like that. Car 63 was named the Yellow Jacket. It was a 1951 Mercury. Her flathead side valve V8 generated about 110 horsepower with its 250 cubic engines. That baby had a 4-speed manual transmission with the shifter on the column, positive traction rear end. You were required to have a welded roll cage, welded seat, and safety seat belts. This thing was just plain awesome in Red's eyes. The Yellow Jacket painted was a brilliant, gleaming, polished yellow, with the broken brown bars across his back like the vicious little creatures who was his namesake. Long & Son's sheet metal and roofing racing team was on the roof in brown letters. Edward Son and Machine Shop, Rankin Lake Pure Oil, Gastonia Goodyear Tire, Slick Elmore's Golf and Garage, and Powell's Lincoln Mercury touted their wares all over the body. Pure lovely, that yellow Mercury coupe, with brown 63 on its doors and its name along the top edge of the roof. But now remember, you can remove things on a stock car. Remember, you can remove things from a stock car. All these cars you saw out there that night were stripped to the bone. They had no generator. They ran just on a battery. A gutted or straight pipe muffler. They had no starter. All the lights had been removed and sheet metal put back in their place. Every window except the front windscreen was removed for safety reasons. Doors and trunk lids were also welded or bolted shut, and the upholstery and all but the driver's seat were removed from its interior. And all the items in the interior were taken out. Door handles, interior lights, ashtrays, and all the things like floor mats. Even the trunk was removed, and a goodly portion of the dashboard and instruments. Most racers bolted the hood down, but Barry just used the regular standard issue hood release. As the rest of the guys got ready, rolling supplies into their assigned places along pit road, Barry gave Red a cram course on racing with the do's and don'ts for this evening. Long talked about things Red might have to do or be called on to do this evening. Long talked about things that Red might have to do, such as leading a draft, or blocking, or a sling assist. He asked Red if he'd ever been drafted. Not the kind in the military, guys, no. That comes later. Side drafted or done it himself? And the answer was yes. But Red said, I've only done it on the highway. Red had drafted, done slingshot passes, and was very familiar with those, but had never done such a thing as a bump draft from either end of it. Now, bump draft is when a guy comes up and hits you in the tail on the back bumper, throws you forward fast, and then he's got that extra draft that pulls him along faster. You can either be doing it or having it done to you. That's what a bump draft is. So he had done these things, but Red thought that would be easy to do, so he lied like a linoleum rug. Oh, well, didn't want to give up that $50, or more importantly, to lose face. The last 50 lapper sportsmen had concluded, and the jalopies had run earlier. So the graders were out on the track getting it ready for the main event. 7 o'clock was approaching. Engines were started and given their last-minute tweaks and rubs. Fans were getting their hot dogs, burgers, and fries, and a cup of ice and Coke for their little brown bags. The off-duty police who provided security were busy looking the other way as drinks were mixed and the bookies took their last-minute bets. Barry probably had some money down, or so Red thought. That may have been why he was pushing Red so hard. As 7:15 neared, Red began to feel jumpy as it started to sink in about what he was about to do. And then he heard it, the loudspeaker making the call. Drivers, start your engines. He swallowed hard, felt very faint, took a deep breath, slipped on his helmet, goggles, and gloves, and crawled back through the Yellow Jacket's windows and began to hook up his harness. That evening's start was to be a rolling start. The cars would line up by twos, side by side. Somehow there was a point system, and I don't know what that is, was in place, and the more points you had from previous races, the closer to the front you were situated. When the white flag was dropped from the contestants' place on what this was called the grid, they were to accelerate to 35 miles per hour and go around the track at least twice, staying in the order that they had started. If the judge felt all things were proper and in order as the starting grid approached the towers, he dropped the green flag and the race would be on. 100 miles, 400 trips around that quarter mile of North Carolina banked red dirt. Red gave a thumbs up and the crew pushed him out into the pit lane, building up speed so that Red could pop the clutch and have the engine roar to life. Remember, he had no starter on this car. The engine caught out onto that red dirt. He roared and took off counterclockwise to get around to the hole point where the race steward in their zebra-striped football referee shirts and hats would guide him into the number 63's assigned spot on the starting grid. Barry would follow him out a little later. Number 63 must have had some success in the past because he was quickly ushered into the fourth slot. That put him on the outside of the second pair of cars. Our boy's front bumper was 6 feet from the back bumper of the car in front of him. He couldn't hear himself think as the drivers gunned their engines while lineup was going on. By this point, our hero was having second thoughts. I mean, very many second thoughts. He felt sick on his stomach and realized he had a death grip on the wheel. To put it bluntly, he was scared as hell. Scared as hell. Finally, the chief steward walked down the line, checking seat belts and telling everyone that the grid was set. He picked up a megaphone and he told us all to pay attention and listen to the loudspeakers and watch the tower where he'd be with the flags. Red felt physically sick. What had he done? Red's stomach dropped even further than it had when he had realized his predicament earlier. A couple of minutes went by, or so it seemed, and he saw the steward climb the tower and raise a flag, white. He held it for what seemed to be only a split second, and down it went. Red froze. I mean, he froze. The white and baby blue 55 Chevy Coupe in front of him accelerated out, and Red just sat there like a knot on a log. Then he noticed the cars going by on his left, and he popped his clutch. Too much juice, the Mercury fish tailed off like a drag racer, so he let off the gas and slowed. The car behind him nearly ran him down, but he got back up to speed and pulled up behind that 55 Chevy Coupe. The speedometer said 35, but he felt like he was doing about 90. Damn, there's that tower again. His nerves settled as he flew past, and they hit the first and second turns for a second time and around and down the backstretch straight away to the third and fourth turns. Then the final turn and up the front straightaway, and there in the tower, the only thing visible to Red, there may have been something else, but the only thing he saw was a green flag as big as a football field. And down it came. The white and baby blue 55 Chevy Coupe threw up a rooster tail of dust and wet mud coating his windshield. He too punched the accelerator pedal. He felt the tires losing traction. He began to fishtail a little. And there it was, the first turn. He oversteered the front tires, and the jacket's rear end started to slide back toward the wall. But luck, or maybe the force, Darth Vader knows people, was with him, and he set the front wheel slightly to the slide to the outside. He popped out of turn 2, running clean, amazed. 2 more laps. And as he came down to turn 2 again, he cut off a Duke Blue Studebaker, number 44. The nickname for these cars in those days was the Stud Buster. Said car slid out high and roared by outside down the straight to the right, and as it passed, the driver gave him the one-fingered salute. Ooh, that really fried Red. But his mind screamed, to the rail, to the rail, to the rail. So checking his mirrors, he went up high and outside. A quick look as he focused on the turn 3, and he realized he was going into that turn at 67 miles an hour. You think he was standing on a blowtorch the way he jerked his foot off that gas pedal. A fraction late on the wheel turn put him into a hard slide toward the upper edge of the track. Couldn't use the brake or he put himself in a spin with the car bearing down on top of him. He was headed over that high bank outside rail. Ah! Screamed his mind, or so he remembered. But from out of nowhere, an instinct popped into his brain, and he kicked it in and floored it, and with the wheels now straight, the rear tires caught and down over the rail, and a sure crash he wasn't going to run into. He went sailing out along the outside rail of the back straightaway. Jumping on the brake pedal, he slowed back down to 25 miles per hour, set the front wheels to the left, and coasted through that turn, and accelerated back up to 45 as he hit the straightaway. These 3 straight jolts of adrenaline in a row now had him literally shaking, trying to get his nerves under control. Wasn't sure, but he might have a touch of damp jockeys as well. That old adage, racing, came to mind at that time, and that says it's not how fast you go into a turn, but it's how fast you come out. That woke him up, and he now truly understood its meaning. From there on out, he was a believer. The little time of slowness allowed him to get control of his body and his mind once more. These first laps brought him to the light, as they say. He had calmed down, but was still scared as hell. Several more laps, and he was getting the hang of the race. He noticed that car number 55, the white and baby blue Chevy that had been in front of him, was sitting in the pit area, and that the car 85, which was a lime green and white Edsel that had started just behind him on the starting grid, was sitting on the infield with a blown, stripped off left tire with no driver inside. People were around it, trying to move it inside the pit area. But he was doing okay, keeping it close to 55 miles per hour, and he was judging his slides to not go over the rail and stay outside and out of trouble. He looked over, and there was Barry in his stallion, number 54, waving at Red. He gave the hand signal to Red to block. And he said, number would you block? It was 44. An evil grin appeared on Red's already flushed face, and as he glanced into the mirror, there he was, coming hard. None of this little buddy, the number 4 Studebaker coming out of turn 4. Barry moved up to pull alongside a car on the inside, and Red got up next to Barry. Now, they had it pretty well blocked off, that track. Red edged right as 44 tried to come around. It blocked him. Tough stuff, buddy, he thought. Still using the guy on the inside, they did about 4 more laps, and there was 2 cars low, roughly side by side. That let Barry bolt out ahead, because he still had that 2-car cushion, so our hero could keep right on blocking for a few more laps. But then Red got foxed. With one of the 2 inside cars, when one of the 2 inside cars pulled in front of the other and entering this home stretch, number 44 got right on Red's back bumper, gave him a little tap. It's called a bump draft. Red felt the car lose contact with the ground, flying forward, out of control. Red had gotten back control now, and as it dropped back down onto the ground, and he dropped down to the rail to block 44. The Studebaker had faked him out, and so he slingshot left and then came back inside and then slid out to the side draft around the outside of Red and caught enough traction to get up beside him. In the process, Red had gotten too fast and had to brake to make the next turn, so 44 punched it, and he went sideways, right out in front of Red. But luckily, his rear wheels caught enough dirt. This is number 44. And he turned up and opened up, and he was cleared running down the straightaway. No crash. Red was tasting the fear in his mouth like metal. And he was standing on his brakes just about, fishtailing all over the place as some cars zipped by him. But he got through the straight and out onto the straight. He took his butt back up to the rail for a couple of laps and noticed over on the back straight opposite him a dark smoke trail beginning to come out of car number 69, a nice cranberry red 1958 Oldsmobile 98. Red never saw him again. Passing pit row, our hero saw that there was a yellow cardboard up in the pits with the letters that meant "come in." So on the next lap, in he went. Boozer ran out with a Coke, 2 Zero candy bars, and a window washing gear. He dashed water on the windshield and squeegeed it clean. Keith and Arnold and Frank, the mechanic, gassed her up while Bird and Frank Coons popped the hood, took off the carburetor top to insert a clean filter into the carburetor. Red was chugging the Coke and nearly strangling on the Zero bars and trying to get his goggles wiped clean. As everyone was buttoning up, Frank came over and told Red he had not responded to any of the lap numbers and that he was in his 170th lap of the 400. Frank thought Frank had thought he had seen smoke coming out of his tailpipe. That's why it brought him in. Frank thought the carburetor filters were clogged up and therefore the gas mixture was too rich. Or maybe the pistons pulled all into the chamber because of the same reason, but that would foul the spark plugs and cause the smoke. So when you get back out there, yell, Frank, check the next couple of laps and we'll see if you are still smoking. Our boy tossed out the candy wrapper bottle and roared off to the wars. Leaving the pit would put him low and inside on the track, almost entering the first turn. Pulling out just behind a big red and blue 1958 Chrysler, as he came by, he saw a pink and white DeSoto number 13 blow a left front tire as it started through turn 1. The wheel caught the dirt, jerked the DeSoto left over into the infield. Said driver compensated, but the wheels jerked back too far. It appeared like he hit the gas again and the car spurted back up onto the track sideways. Barreling down him was the oncoming orange and brown Plymouth, number 99. Blam! The Plymouth T-boned the DeSoto. The multicolored Dodge was high toward the rail and beside the now T-boned DeSoto. The collided cars went sliding up the curved back rail, catching the poor bastard in the Dodge, taking him up to the top and then over the rail. In that instant, Red got a mental snapshot of the bottom of the Dodge as it started to roll over and down the other side. But our protagonist wasn't out of the soup yet. He had been moving up that way to get back high, and he was headed right for that 3-car pileup. Standing on the brake, he screeched to a stop about 3 feet from the dormant DeSoto and the Plymouth. One driver was trying to clear his lone seat belt. The other just sat there and shook his head like he was trying to clear it. Red carefully backed up his yellow jacket, turned downhill, and eased around that pileup. The yellow caution flag was now out, so he had to stay in the same position as related to the other cars on the track. And please don't ask me to explain how they did that. The yellow caution flag was now out, so he had to stay in that situation. You had to reduce your speed down to 25 miles an hour. That was mandatory. That froze your race position, but you could pit. Well, for the next 15 or 20 laps, the caution flag was out as they cleared the wreckage. As our young driver, about 2 lanes into the caution, noticed a cloud of steam beginning to pour out of a car up in front of him. It was car 54. Hey, that's Barry, yelled Red into the sound-consuming engine thunder. Somehow a pinhole had appeared in the water hose between the engine block and the radiator of Barry's car. Had the coolant water been lost suddenly, the engine would probably have burned up. Barry made it to the pit and managed to get in. Next couple of rounds under the yellow flag, Ken saw Keith and Frank Coons under the hood wearing face shields, railroad gloves, and coveralls. and trying to use monkey grip tape to seal that hole in the pipe. Bert and Robinson were busy with two blowtorches trying to heat water in a wash tub. You see, they would need to replace the water in the cooling system. Cold water cannot be put directly onto any cooling system. Cold water on a hot surface would cause the engine metal to distort and crack and probably bust either of the blocks or even both. So in this situation, boiling water was mixed 1-to-1 with antifreeze and was poured into the coolant system with the engine running. The radiator cap is left on the safety position to take pressure off. Now your car is going to run about 10 degrees hotter, but you can still get through with it. This hack worked because several laps later, Red saw Barry come out of the pit. The race was still under the caution flag. He saw the yellow go up as the white, and the white was lifted. Everyone had to stay in their places once the white came out, and when everything looked good to the judge, here came that green flag again. About 3 or 4 laps later, a Buick metallic gold went into pit row and stopped, and then was pushed off into the infield. Never saw it again, but learned it had lost its brakes. You didn't want that baby out on a track. On this race went. Red had gotten into the habit of checking the pit. Red knew he was about lap 250, with Barry out ahead of him by some 40 laps. Barry was running second behind a blue and silver 1957 Bel Air V8. With half the field now out of the race, our hero found driving like Barry had wanted to be much easier. Stay high, keep it about 50. But Red had gotten a little cocky and careless. They seemed to go hand in hand. While going down the straight, running in the middle of the track, he made a snap decision. Our bright young racer boy decided to go down on the edge of the track and maybe catch up a little distance on that fellow running in the 5th place ahead of him. Red wanted to really race for some money later, he thought, so I better do this. And guess who didn't check his mirrors? An olive drab Pontiac Le Mans number 40 with gold marking was down on the inside toward the rail. As the yellow jacket came down, he tagged the Pontiac's bumper with the rear quarter panel of the jacket. That sent Red's rear end spinning up toward the outside with turn 3 coming up. Lucky for Red that the Pontiac's driver reacted quickly on the brake and didn't run him over. Up through the 3rd turn bank, Red and the jacket twirled. He wrestled the wheel back left by mistake, which threw him into a counterspin. That centrifugal force slammed his body toward the passenger side door. The safety harness locked. He wasn't going to be a billiard ball today. Ouch, he said. He'd have sore ribs in the morning. He knew that, even if this mess didn't get any worse. But it did. I'm sure everyone here has had that moment of frozen time when everything is crystal clear as disaster looms. Here was one for Red. As the yellow jacket's tail kept spinning up to make this a 360-degree spin, gravity slowed the spin. Another instinct from nowhere came to Red, and he allowed him to pull the wheel straight with only his left hand still leaning over toward the passenger side. The jacket came to a stop, left front wheel hanging over the edge of the track embankment. Motor dead, facing down the wrong way of the track. Red shook his head to clear it with a sharp pain in his right side. He scooted back left into the driver's seat, looked out the window, right down a 10-foot drop. Swallowing hard, he just sat thinking, what to do, what to do, what to do. Dead motor, no starter, cars whizzing by, what to do, what to do. Red's mind was almost gibbering. Calming a little, he decided to gamble. He would put the jacket in reverse, put it in the clutch, and let it roll down the incline of the 4th turn, hoping to catch enough speed so a pop start would work. If it didn't start, it would at least roll into the infield and he'd be out of trouble, he hoped. Gazing down the backstretch, he watched as the area cleared to one car coming. Barry Long's 54 was over in turn 1. So he pushed in the clutch, started rocking himself back and forth to get the jacket rolling, and roll it did, with Barry's car coming at him but slowing. He popped the clutch just as his rear end reached the inside edge. The motor caught. He slammed the clutch back in to prevent another stall, and the built-up speed of the roll and the sudden impetus of the motor starting sent the jacket about 40 yards over the infield apron and into the infield. Hitting the brakes, the car slid another 10 or so feet to stop in the muddy infield. Looking over toward the tower, he saw a yellow caution was out now, thanks to him. So Red gunned the jacket, the fish tailing in, throwing up a rooster tail of mud and out onto the track. He looked over in another turn and he noticed that Barry was trailing smoke again, so he'd have to come in. His old friend, the number 4 green stud buster, sailed by out on the track as the driver gave him another salute. He was really getting, anyway. Back to the top, back to speed, and he was back in the groove. He didn't look at the pits as he hit turn 4. As the jacket roared down the home stretch, he noticed all the people jumping up and down, waving and pointing behind him. So, why not? He checked his mirror. Bright boy. Only to find a trail of black smoke coming out of where the left rear quarter paddle had been shoved into the wheel. He was chewing up that tire due to friction. Barry, again in the pit, was getting his hose taped again. Again, the boys were boiling water, and Red was panting like a dog. Hot motor, hot night, led to soaked overalls and gloves. Frank Kuhn ran up and stuck his head in the window, pulled it out and yelled for Boozer and the Bird to gas him. Get a filter on this jacket, he yelled to Keith and Robinson. He had Red roll that jacket forward and rolled it back a couple times, then sprinted off to his panel van and came back with a double hook chain, hooking one in on something under the car. He then ran over to one of the posts that lined pit row and wrapped the chain around it and secured it. Coming back to the wounded jacket, he told Red they were going to pull the crumpled metal off the tire so the jacket could continue the race. So easing forward, he heard metal screech. Frank yelled, "Stop, now come back." He leaned out as Kuhn rolled up under the car to disengage the chain while Keith and Bird unhooked it from the post. He gave the wheels a quick inspection, and then he asked Red to roll forward and back a couple of times, and came up the river to the window and screamed, "Red, that tire isn't cut. The camber on the wheel seems okay, and that tire should get you at least another 150 laps. So get back up on that rail and slow her down to 45 for the rest of this race. You got me?" Red just shook his head. The stallion was still ahead on the jacket waiting for some water. As Red came out of the pit, he noticed that there were only 3 cars rolling now, counting himself. Barry was still in the pit. Checking Susan in the pit, he finally saw the lap count was at 290 and Barry was still in the pit. As Red rolled along, he figured out that green number 40 stud buster was literally flying around the track trying to close the distance on that 57 Bel Air. The Chevy seemed not to be able to push more speed out of his chariot, and the stud buster lapped him several times. Red just stayed on the rail, out of trouble. But he was dead tired. As the laps ticked off, 295, 305, 320, 355, with his arms just feeling like 2 sacks of lead and getting weaker by the minute. Red tried to squirm around in the jacket seat to relieve the growing pain in his lower back. His right hand ached where he had hit the passenger side door when he slammed into the harness. He thought, well, was this stupid-ass stunt worth it? At that moment, his answer was big no. On lap 38, Red saw gray smoke coming out of his nemesis, studbuster number 44. It increased, and he began to slow down. As the yellow jacket came level with the studbuster for a few seconds on the backstretch, he realized that the driver was just trying to keep it running. Red guessed that he had blown a gasket the way it sounded. The Duke Blues studbuster number 40 made it around the turn 4, slowing as it came toward the pit road and stopped just as it entered. Next time around, Red saw that his crew and he, the driver himself, were pushing her off into the infield. So long, sucker. Barry had made a couple more pit stops, but fortunately for him, decided not to ruin his motor. He had enough laps to cover the free entries and qualify for the next three sanctioned races, so he rolled the stallion behind the infield barrier. Red was about in lap 390 when he saw the checkered flag a-waving for that Chevy Bel Air. After that, he had the track to himself, so he slowed down to about 45 miles per hour. As he passed the pit, he saw Susan wildly waving the 399 card for the yellow jacket. A glorious feeling engulfed him as he rolled along, down past turn 1, past turn 2, 3, and 4, where the disaster nearly got him, because he was still alive and had pulled off his latest caper. Folks, dead tired, dirty, and aching like a bull, hungry as hell, as he roared under that checkered flag and around the fast as he could go. As he came back around, he headed into the pit with a silly grin all over his face. Everyone was motioning and yelling for him to go on again. What the hell, he thought. Then it hit him. He needed to go for 2 more laps in case the lap stewards had shorted him on the number of laps he had run. So, with a red face, he cruised off the last 2 laps thinking, man, whoever was holding my beer hadn't drunk it. Since they were distributing all the prize money that night, and the purse being $2,500, Barry picked up a nice 930 for his night's work, and he got himself all his starting positions for all of his cars. But Red, he was elated. He could now say he had finished second in a NASCAR race. He still brags about it today, you know. As Red slowly unhooked and crawled out the yellow jacket, he gave her a pat on his head and kissed the yellow jacket. Barry gave him a bear hug, and the Union Road boys were shaking his hand, pounding him on the back, whooping and hollering. You know, Susan even gave him a kiss on the cheek. He was happiest with that. A happy bunch loaded the yellow jacket and the black beauty back on their trailers, locked them down, and shared a couple 6-packs of Schlitz. A reporter from the Gaston Gazette came by taking pictures, but Barry luckily stepped up to give him the shot. Our young driver had to stay out of the limelight, you see. Had Red's dad seen his picture in the paper, there would have been hell to pay. Everyone had a happy glow, but Barry, Susan, Frank were worn out and headed home. After Barry had come back from picking up his prize money and that second place trophy, he gave that to the Union Road boys as a thank you. The Union Road boys headed back down to South Carolina to continue celebration. And you know, old Red, he never went back to the racetrack, but he did on several other occasions ask someone to hold his beer and watch this. And I'm thankful he's still alive. Yeah, Red. Yeah. As they say, yeah, that was Red. And you know, he had that attitude. Well, I kind of got the same attitude. Here's my church key. Anybody want to hold my beer?